Not really a holiday read. Hey guys, welcome back. This is our last spoiler talk of the year. The December Book of the Month poll winner was The Kingdom of Sweets. This book is marketed as the Nutcracker retelling. In this story, Clara and Natasha are twins who have a sorcerer godfather named Drosselmeyer. And one Christmas Eve, when the girls are 17, they are transported to the Kingdom of Sweets, where Natasha finally gets her chance of revenge. Overall, I enjoyed the writing style of this book and I felt it had potential. However, I was never fully invested in the story. It wasn't as whimsical or deep into the fantasy aspect as I was hoping for. I wanted to spend the majority of the book in the Kingdom of Sweets, but the majority of the book ended up being focused on Natasha complaining about her life. Now time to get into the spoilers and really dive into what happened in this book. So if you don't want anything spoiled, this is your warning. The book was divided into acts, like it was a ballet or a play, and I did really love that. I love when books are divided into nice, easy parts. The chapters were also really short, which is something I appreciate. So opening up, we had the overture. The book is going to be told from the first person point of view of Natasha, and then she has a twin sister, Clara. They were both born on Christmas, and at their christening, Drosselmeyer, a sorcerer, declares himself their godfather, and he blesses them, where Clara is light and Natasha is dark. Clara then grew up to be the lovely one, loved by everyone, while Natasha was the outcast, not disliked per se, but ignored. Act 1 is Christmas Eve, and the family is having their annual Christmas Eve party. Since the twins were born on Christmas, this is leading right into their 17th birthdays. Even though Natasha has been the outcast sister her whole life, she and Clara are still very close, and they're still really important to one another. Growing up, Clara has always been invited to all the parties and social events. She has a line of suitors just out the door, and her dad is just waiting to find the best option to marry her off to. She's never had a day of hardship, essentially, because she's the light twin. Natasha was cursed with being the dark twin, so she's never invited to things, and her only friend is Clara. But as the novel progressed, the less I felt bad for Natasha and felt like she was really bringing this outcast twin thing onto herself. Her vibe gets very annoying. Now, both sisters have a bit of a secret love lives going on. Clara is apparently newly pregnant by one of the servant boys, and Natasha is in love with the Duke's son, Conrad. At night, he sneaks into her window and they have sex, but in public, he's like, he acts like he doesn't know her. So basically, he's just using her, but she's hoping that he will fall in love with her one day. Good luck with that. The Christmas Eve party is underway, and Clara is surrounded by her admirers as usual, while Natasha is by herself. Drosselmeyer makes his grand entrance into the party. He shows up with his boys in tow, which apparently he does this every year. He has this weird group of boy servants, which they're referred to as boys, but really I think they're like in their 20s in the book. So Drosselmeyer makes an announcement that he has gifts for the twins' birthdays. For Natasha, he opens a box with this lifelike clown in it that goes around terrorizing people. And then for Clara, he gives her a small nutcracker that just starts patrolling around the party. Drosselmeyer then announces the engagement between Clara and Conrad, the Duke's son that Natasha loves. Obviously, this is gutting to Natasha. She had no idea that this was being arranged, but it's clear by the look on Clara's face that she knew what was gonna happen tonight, but she chose not to tell Natasha. Everyone's very excited about this news. Ooh, Clara's engaged. So the rest of the party is celebrating this news, and Natasha's just having a bad night. At one point, she has a conversation with one of Drosselmeyer's boys, Mikhail, and he is looking for the nutcracker. He says that he made it and he he can't find it, and he warns Natasha that if she sees it, to leave it alone because the Nutcracker holds a great danger for one as poorly used as herself, a slight of her being used by Conrad. So Act 1 ends with the party being over. Clara did try to talk to Natasha about the engagement, but Natasha's still super, super mad. She then later finds Clara sleeping in the parlor holding the Nutcracker. Then the Nutcracker gets down, goes to Natasha, and holds its arms up like it wants her to pick it up. Of course, not listening to Mikhail's warnings, she does. Act 2 is the Sugar Plum Fairy. The Nutcracker transports Natasha and Clara to another land, but it's clear that this place was not made for Natasha to visit. It was made for Clara. It's the Kingdom of Sweets, and it's covered with all of these candies. Kind of think of the factory from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It's like that. Clara gets swept away by the Nutcracker, who is now transformed into this handsome man, and they go by sleigh through this land, while Natasha, who no one notices, just follows behind on foot. The sleigh's destination is this grand castle, also made of sweets. Clara gets guided inside while Natasha speaks to the guards outside, and they're like, "We didn't know that Clara had a sister." And they're very surprised. They were only given her instruction specifically regarding Clara, but they guide Nat inside anyway to a grand ballroom where Clara is the center of attention, just like she was in their world. Natasha gets sat at a table away from Clara, and while just sitting there observing her, she's stewing, and she realizes more and more their differences, and she starts to become more and more bitter and pissed off at Clara. The woman sat next to Nat reveals herself to be the Sugar Plum Fairy. This is her castle, and she has some sort of beef with Drosselmeyer. She's also surprised to learn that Mikhail is the one who made the Nutcracker and not Drosselmeyer, and she gets pissed, which we will very lightly dive into the relationship between those three, but not nearly enough. I really feel like the novel should have explained more, or should have like maybe had some flashbacks or something, because like their relationship between the fairy, Mikhail, and Drosselmeyer, like that's like the whole kind of crux of the novel. But it kind of like, we just kind of glide right by it, and then we just get more of Nat or Natasha's horrible inner dialogue. The fairy then offers Nat a deal that she can stay here in this land for vengeance, but if she decides to take the Sugar Plum Fairy's offer, she will belong to the Sugar Plum Fairy, and Natasha's like, I don't know, maybe. So Natasha's exploring the castle, comes across memories of her and Clara from when they were children. She also sees a particular memory of Clara and Drosselmeyer discussing Clara's engagement to Conrad. Drosselmeyer offers to Clara to arrange the marriage between Natasha and Conrad instead, and Clara just laughs and is like, ha, Natasha, a Duchess? No, I'll marry Conrad. So this is kind of the thing that throws Natasha off the edge, and she realizes, oh, this whole thing isn't really about her being mad about Conrad. It's about Clara being a bad person, when for years she thought that Clara was on her side. And then seeing this memory, she realizes like, oh, Clara never gave a fuck about me. Natasha sees Clara running from the castle. She decides to follow her, and she is dead set on not letting Clara get away with all that she's done. So she catches up with Clara in the woods. Clara has been captured by the fairy. The twins have a confrontation about Conrad, about what Natasha saw between Clara and Drosselmeyer. Basically, Natasha is done, and she strangles Clara and kills her. Just like that. And the Sugar Plum Fairy then is like, our bargain is done. Soon you will find yourself alone with Drosselmeyer, and then you will call me in. Then the fairy transforms Natasha into Clara and tells her that her end of the bargain has also now been done, and Natasha can now go enjoy her new life. So the act ends with Natasha waking in her house, and she's just Clara now. And now for the vast majority of the rest of the book, we're done with the Kingdom of Sweets and spend the rest of the book back in the real world, which was such a disappointment for me. I wanted to explore more of the magical world, since I thought that's what the book was going to be about. Apparently not. Personally, I feel like the book falls into a bit of a lull for the next like 100 to 150 pages. Act 3 is called The Dollhouse. The real Natasha disappeared on Christmas Eve after the party, and everyone disagrees that she must have thrown herself into the river and committed suicide after learning about Conrad's engagement. Natasha, now impersonating Clara, marries Conrad and they move into Conrad's family's mansion. Natasha tells Conrad that she miscarried because she wasn't actually pregnant when Clara really was, so that gets rid of that problem. Then we pass through the next 5 years of their marriage. So we just read about her life for the next 5 years. Surprise, surprise, Natasha, living as Clara, she finds her life to be unfulfilling. She's expected to behave like Clara since she's assuming her identity, and she says she's content with this new life, but her dialogue, her inner dialogue throughout the rest of the book disagrees. She doesn't like how Conrad and his family are towards others. She never realized that they don't actually care about those less fortunate than them. She apparently was just always enamored by Conrad, but she realizes that she never actually knew him the whole time. Shock. So after 5 years, the fairy visits her and says she's growing impatient and Natasha needs to keep up her end of the bargain. So at this year's Christmas Eve party, she gets a moment alone on the roof with Drosselmeyer. She lets the fairy in, and then they're transported back to what she thinks is the Kingdom of Sweets. Natasha then leaves the fairy and Drosselmeyer to their business, as she can hear Drosselmeyer screams in the background. And the fairy has transformed him into like this creature, and there's corpses everywhere in this land. And basically the fairy tells her it's no concern of hers, she should leave and never think of this place again. Okay. So again, she wakes up in her old world and everyone realizes that Drosselmeyer can't be found, so he must be dead. Natasha is told by Drosselmeyer's lawyers that Clara was the sole inheritor of all of everything that Drosselmeyer had. She doesn't understand why Drosselmeyer would leave everything to Clara, but at the same time, she doesn't really think to dwell on it. And it really doesn't get brought back up, so I don't know why she's confused, because it doesn't matter. So the act ends with saying that should have been the end of it, but it was not. But honestly, yeah, the book should have ended. The Toymaker, Act 4. Act 4 begins with it being 8 months after Drosselmeyer's death. There's emerged a new Toymaker in town, Orlov, and no one knows who he is, but his toys have the same quality of the Nutcracker. So Natasha immediately thinks of Mikhail, the one who made the Nutcracker, and thinks he must be this mysterious new Toymaker. One night, Natasha gets a visit from the real Clara, but they've kind of like switched bodies. So she's like in Natasha's body, but she's alive and she's decomposing. And she's like, of course I didn't die. We're twins. And Clara says she made her own deal with the fairy and she wants her life back. So Clara starts haunting Natasha. Natasha tries to find out like how to make this stop. Like, how was Drosselmeyer able to avoid being haunted by the fairy? Maybe like what he did can help Natasha with dealing with Clara. So Natasha goes to Drosselmeyer's house to do some snooping. In the house, she finds this large mirror that she walks through, and she finds a room where she discovers that Drosselmeyer had kept Mikhail in, forcing him to make the toys for him. Behind her, she then sees a shadow of the fairy, and it becomes clear that Mikhail is the fairy's son, and Drosselmeyer took him. It took us a long time to get to that conclusion. So Natasha has the mirror removed from the house and put into where she lives in Conrad's parents' mansion. Nat then visits the Toymaker Orlov, and no surprise, it's actually Mikhail. He goes by Orlov now, and because he's free of Drosselmeyer. They have a conversation, and we learn that Drosselmeyer had Mikhail make the Nutcracker to protect Clara, and the clown to kill Natasha, because when twins born on Christmas are split, Clara would become a talesman for Drosselmeyer to give him protection against the Sugar Plum Fairy. But twins born on Christmas are a hard magic to kill, according to Mikhail. And this is why Clara has come back to haunt Natasha, They were never actually separated. She never actually died. Also that night on Christmas Eve, instead of just making the Nutcracker the way that Drosselmeyer wanted, Mikhail made the Nutcracker to open the Kingdom of Sweets, to give his mother access to the twins, because then he would be free of Drosselmeyer, because Drosselmeyer stole him from the fairy, and that's why the fairy wanted revenge on Drosselmeyer. But now Mikhail says that he will not go back to his mother's world. He's grown accustomed to this new world, and he doesn't want any part of what she has going on. Basically, he's like, I got my own stuff going on here. I don't want to go back and live with mom. So he warns Natasha that his mother is likely not done with her, as Drosselmeyer made her dark. His mother has uses for that. He then agrees to make a creation for Nat, and we find out what it is on Christmas Eve. At this year's Christmas Eve party, Natasha unwraps what he made, another Nutcracker that transports the twins back to the Kingdom of Sweets. Act 5, Nemesis. The twins are in the woods with the fairy, and the fairy basically means for them to fight to the death. But instead, Natasha asks for them to be switched back. Clara then returns back to her real world, back to her old life as herself, while Natasha is trapped inside of the castle, where time moves differently than it does in the real world. She's kind of stuck in a purgatory of sorts for years, until surprisingly the thing that is now Drosselmeyer helps her. He's able to give her the fairy's key to get out of there, and there's this similar mirror that's in the castle, like the one that she took from Drosselmeyer's house and put it into the mansion. She steps into the mirror, uses the key to unlock the door, and then Clara pulls her back through the mirror into their real world. And curtain! Years and years have now passed. Natasha has moved from Russia to America, where she lived out the rest of her life. The book ends with her being 48, coming across another transport on the street that was once left there by the fairy. She's transported back again to the Kingdom of Sweets. We see the fairy, and she's there, and she's dying. She offers for Natasha to become the fairy, basically, and tells her that she can live forever. Natasha, though, declines, and then the fairy dies, which is funny because she said that if Natasha became the new fairy, she would become immortal. But the fairy herself wasn't immortal, and she died. It didn't really make sense to me. Whatever. Then Clara appears, and Clara and Natasha both die together, because in this time frame of the book, 48 is old, apparently. This was such a bummer. My main thought with this novel is I don't understand the points. I would have liked for this novel to be like this strong feminist novel, like about her like finding herself or something like that. But then the author spent the whole book with Natasha being like, poor me, no one liked me because I wasn't as pretty as my sister. But then the majority of the novel, she becomes her pretty sister. Also, we have this interesting idea with the Kingdom of Sweets and the Sugar Plum Fairy. But we don't spend much time exploring this world or having the fairy in the book, because we're following Natasha around and listening to her annoying inner dialogue about how she basically isn't happy with any of these lives she's been given. I needed this book to explore Drosselmeyer more and everything that transpired between him and the Sugar Plum Fairy and Mikhail, and how everything came to be with the twins. I think that focusing on that aspect of the story would have made the book way more interesting than what we were given with Natasha. In the end, I thought the book was fine. It got 3 stars for me. I didn't love it, but at the same time, I also wanted to know where everything was going, even if in the end it was more disappointing than what I was hoping for. So that is it for me today, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.